Nano and Wasi met in the most unassuming of places, a quiet bookstore tucked between the chaos of city life. It was a refuge, a place where neither judgment nor expectation could reach them. Nano, with his thoughtful eyes and quiet demeanor, spent hours sketching in the margins of old books, capturing fleeting emotions on paper. Wasi, ever the storyteller, could weave entire worlds from a single sentence. Their connection was effortless, as if the universe had conspired to bring them together. What began as casual conversations about poetry and forgotten literature soon grew into something neither of them could quite define. Wasi found himself drawn to the quiet depth in Nano's eyes, the way his presence felt like a safe harbor in an otherwise turbulent world. Nano, hesitant yet intrigued, cherished the rare understanding Wasi offered, a bond unspoken yet profound. As months passed, they became inseparable. Late-night phone calls stretched into dawn, filled with whispered confessions, dreams too fragile to share with the outside world. Wasi spoke of ambitions, of breaking free from expectations. Nano, always the listener, shared pieces of himself he had never dared voice before. But the world does not always welcome what it does not understand. Their closeness did not go unnoticed, and soon, whispers began to weave their way through their social circle. Friends who once laughed with them now exchanged glances in their absence. There were unasked questions in the eyes of acquaintances, insinuations masked as jokes. "You two spend a lot of time together," a friend commented one evening, the implication heavy in his tone. Wasi laughed it off, but something in his expression flickered, a shadow of doubt planted by words meant to divide. Nano sensed the shift. Wasi, once so unwavering in their connection, began hesitating before returning texts, offering brief, absent-minded responses instead of their usual long-winded conversations. There was an invisible wall forming between them, thin yet impenetrable. One evening, as they sat by the riverside, a place once sacred to their friendship, Nano finally voiced the question that had been weighing on him. "Do you think they're right?" His voice was steady, but his heart pounded. Wasi hesitated. "About what?" "You know what." Silence stretched between them. The river moved ceaselessly, uncaring of the turmoil unfolding on its banks. Wasi exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "People will always talk, Nano. It doesn't mean anything." But it did. Nano could see it in the way Wasi avoided his gaze, in the way uncertainty crept into the spaces where trust once lived. A force beyond their control had begun to unravel what they had so carefully built. Nano looked out at the water, realization settling in his chest. This was only the beginning. The distance between them was subtle at first, missed calls, shorter replies, plans canceled at the last moment. Nano told himself it was nothing, that Wasi was just busy. But deep inside, a quiet fear took root. He knew something had shifted, though he couldn't pinpoint when or why. Then came Rohan. Rohan had always lingered on the outskirts of their friendship, watching, waiting. He was the kind of person who thrived in the cracks of trust, someone who whispered just enough poison to let doubt fester. And now he saw his chance. "You ever wonder if Nano's keeping things from you?" Rohan mused one evening, his voice casual, his eyes anything but. Wasi frowned. "What do you mean?" Rohan shrugged, leaning back as if the thought had only just occurred to him. "I don't know, man. He's been close with someone else lately. People are talking." Wasi scoffed, but something about Rohan's tone unsettled him. "Nano's not like that." "Maybe," Rohan conceded, his fingers tapping idly against the table. "But I'd watch my back if I were you." The words stayed with Wasi long after Rohan had left. He told himself they meant nothing, that he trusted Nano. But trust, once shaken, rarely settles back into place so easily. Nano felt the difference almost immediately. Wasi's warmth was now laced with something colder, his words measured, his glances wary. Conversations became a battlefield of unspoken accusations, where every pause felt like an unasked question. One evening, Nano confronted him. "Something's wrong. Just say it." Wasi hesitated. "Rohan mentioned something about you spending time with someone else." Nano blinked. "Someone else? You tell me." Wasi's voice was edged with something Nano had never heard before: doubt. A sharp sting of betrayal coursed through Nano, not because Wasi believed the rumors, but because he had even considered them. "So, you'd rather trust Rohan than me?" "I don't know what to think," Wasi admitted, his hands clenching into fists. "People are saying things and You what?" Nano cut in, his voice quiet but firm. "You think I would betray you? After everything?" Wasi looked away. And in that moment, Nano knew. It wasn't just Rohan's words. It was the weight of the world pressing down on them, the whispers, the stares, the suffocating expectations. Nano swallowed the lump in his throat. "If you don't trust me, then maybe you never really knew me at all." The words hung between them, heavy and unyielding. Wasi didn't answer. Nano turned and walked away, but with every step, a piece of him fractured. He had always feared losing Wasi, but he never thought it would be because of a lie. Behind him, Wasi remained frozen in place, watching Nano disappear into the night. And for the first time, he wasn't sure if he would ever find his way back to him. Nano had always imagined that if he and Wasi ever parted, it would be on their own terms, perhaps a slow drifting apart, a quiet understanding that life was pulling them in different directions. But this felt like a wound inflicted by hands he once trusted. Days passed in silence. Wasi didn't call. Nano didn't reach out either. What was there to say? That he was heartbroken? That the weight of being doubted by the one person he had trusted most was crushing him? That every whispered rumor, every sideways glance, had finally succeeded in driving them apart? Wasi, too, felt the absence like a phantom limb. His phone sat untouched, Nano's last message unread, as if opening it would force him to face the enormity of his mistake. But anger still clouded his judgment. He convinced himself that if Nano truly cared, he would have fought harder, explained himself, proved Rohan wrong. But then, proof came anyway, just not from Nano. A week after their last conversation, Wasi found himself in Rohan's company once more. The conversation was light at first, but then Rohan slipped. A careless smirk, a misplaced word. I had to do something." "You were so wrapped up in Nano, it was almost pathetic," Rohan chuckled. Wasi's stomach twisted. "What are you talking about?" Rohan waved a dismissive hand. "I just gave you a little push, man. You needed to see that Nano wasn't as perfect as you thought." The realization struck Wasi like a physical blow. "You lied." Rohan rolled his eyes. "It's not a big deal. You were too close anyway. People were starting to talk. I did you a favor." A favor. That was what he called it. Destroying trust, severing bonds, planting seeds of doubt. Wasi's hands trembled as the weight of his mistake settled in his chest. He had let Rohan manipulate him. He had let a liar steal what had once been unbreakable. Without another word, Wasi left. The world outside felt sharper, colder. He needed to see Nano, to explain, to take back the words he never should have spoken. But when he arrived at Nano's apartment, the doorbell echoed into emptiness. A neighbor passing by stopped at the sight of Wasi's desperate expression. "He's gone," she said simply. Wasi felt the words sink into his bones. "Gone. Left 2 days ago. Didn't say where." A hollow silence followed. Wasi stood frozen as the reality of it all unraveled before him. He had doubted the one person who had never given him a reason to. And now Nano was gone. The regret was immediate, suffocating. But regret, Wasi realized, was useless when there was no one left to hear it. Wasi stood outside Nano's empty apartment, the weight of his mistakes pressing down on him like an unforgiving storm. The silence was deafening, the absence undeniable. Nano was gone, not just from the city, but from Wasi's life. And Wasi had no one to blame but himself. Days turned into weeks, yet the ache did not fade. Wasi found himself replaying every moment, every conversation, searching for the instant when doubt had taken root. He realized now that trust was not something easily rebuilt, that once fractured, even love could crumble under the weight of suspicion. Rohan had vanished from Wasi's life just as quickly as Nano had, but for entirely different reasons. Wasi no longer had room for those who thrived on the destruction of others. Yet, cutting Rohan out did not erase the damage done. It did not bring Nano back. One evening, Wasi found himself at the riverside, the place where their bond had first begun to unravel. The water moved ceaselessly, indifferent to human sorrow, to regret, to longing. He imagined Nano standing beside him, sketchbook in hand, lost in thought. The memory was so vivid that for a brief moment, he let himself believe it was real. But it wasn't. Nano was somewhere else now, building a new life, free from the weight of betrayal. Wasi could only hope that, wherever he was, he had found peace. Wasi never stopped searching for him, not in the desperate way he had in the beginning, but in quieter moments, a familiar face in a crowd, a glimpse of an artist lost in his work, the soft echo of laughter that sounded just a little too familiar. But Nano remained a ghost, a love that could have been, a lesson learned too late. And so, Wasi carried the weight of his choices. Some nights, he wished he could turn back time, rewrite the story with a different ending. But he knew better. Some stories were never meant to have a second chance. Only memories remained, of a friendship turned into something deeper, of a trust shattered by the whispers of others, of a love undone not by fate, but by fear. And in the end, that was the real tragedy. Not that Nano had left, but that Wasi had given him a reason to.